Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you 15 of the best stocks of all time and what they have in common so that maybe you can figure out a investing strategy. As you can see, number one is Berkshire Hathaway, and these are not necessarily in a particular order. I'm not saying Berkshire Hathaway is the greatest investment of all time, but I'm giving you 15 of the best, and then I'm going to find some commonalities between them. So at Berkshire Hathaway, 19.84% annualized return between June 1997 and December 2016, and they do not offer dividends, but they are a multinational conglomerate holding company. Of course, you know them as the company that Warren Buffett founded, who is known as probably the greatest investor of all time. So you can look at them, look at their share price, 386,400, which is just mind-boggling. It's ridiculous. But look how well they've done over the years, and this is just in the past 5 years. If you look at Max on Google Finance, you can see that they have just an amazing track record, and that's why Warren Buffett has been one of the richest people of all time and the greatest investors of all time. So another one of the greatest stocks that you could have invested in all time is Altria, which is a tobacco company. They're known for big cigarette brands, cigars, smokeless tobacco, and they also own Saint Michel Wine Estates, which is a major producer of wine. So those are some of the things they're known for. 17.7% annualized return from 97 to 2016 with a 3.8% dividend yield in 2019. So just amazing returns, and obviously a major player in the tobacco game. And if you look at Altria, if you look at the Max there, they really peaked right around 2017, and they don't have a huge share price right now, but if you invested in them back when they were just dirt cheap, at just a few cents a share, they would have made you a lot of money. So next, of course, you have Apple, which you've definitely heard of. They are a American multinational technology company. Obviously, you're probably aware of the iPhone, the Mac computer, AirPods, all these different amazing technologies that they've come up with. They've had a 16.3% annualized return from June 1997 to December 2016 and a 1.4% dividend yield in 2019. So definitely one of the greatest stocks ever, still growing. And if you look at the maximum on Google Finance, they didn't do much for a long time, their first 20 years or so. Then they came out with the iPhone, they came out with the MacBook, they started really innovating, and now they're one of the greatest technology stocks ever. So then you have Microsoft, another one of the greatest technology stocks of all time. 25% annualized returns from 97 to 2016, 1.9% dividend yield in 2019, and of course they're known for all sorts of things like Microsoft Office, all sorts of personal computers and services that you can get to use for business or personal type projects. You can see right there that they were doing really well in the 2000s, but when they got to around 2015, they really started to take off, and now they're up to $234.81 for their current stock price here in March 2021. So then you have Alphabet, which of course is the parent company of Google, YouTube, and all these, pretty much the top two search engines in the entire world. So 24.9% annualized returns from June 1997 to December 2016, and it's probably even higher than that if you can calculate it based on numbers up to the end of 2020. If you look at their stock price, $2,000 plus already, and just steadily climbing over the years. So then you have Amazon, of course, which is one of the top stocks right now. Obviously, they are the biggest online e-commerce company. They're big into cloud computing, digital streaming, and artificial intelligence. And of course, Jeff Bezos is also trying to get into space and other things. But they have a 37.4% annualized return from June 1997 to December 2016. Obviously, the average would be much higher now if you account for the last couple of years that Amazon just really blew up. So if you look at Google Finance, $3,000 plus for their stock price right now in March 2021. Just look how good they were doing up until 2020, and then they just made a huge jump after that. During COVID, when pretty much everybody was staying home, ordering their stuff in from Amazon, having it shipped to their house. I mean, they're pretty much the future. They're doing streaming, they have music, they're doing all sorts of things. So then you have Tesla. Tesla, of course, is one of the newer ones on this list, but at their IPO in January 29th, 2010, they had a $17 per share price. Now they are over $700 here at the beginning of March 2021. So that's over a 4,100% increase in just 10 years. And then, of course, they are known for their electric cars that are also self-driving. They have battery energy technology where they can store energy from solar panels. They can install solar roof tiles on your roof. They're just pretty much the future, and they're already making a huge impact in the stock market. So you've probably seen that their founder, Elon Musk, was the richest man in the world, kind of off and on between him and Jeff Bezos the last few months here at the beginning of 2021. But they are over $700 and just really taking off, especially in the past year or so. Then you have Coca-Cola, another one obviously that's been around for over a century. 13.1% annualized return from June 1997 to December 2016, not even accounting for the decades and decades it was going on before that. Obviously, they're one of the top beverage companies ever, and you know, it's not just soda. They do water, they do juice, they own a lot of different companies, and one of the greatest, you know, investments of all time. So if you look at them, they're still kind of steadily climbing. They had a really nice peak there in 1998. Then they kind of went down a little bit. Now they're going back up. But all time, still one of the better stocks ever. And they started at a dirt cheap amount because they're such an old company. Then you have Exxon Mobil, which is, of course, an oil and gas corporation, and which, you know, is a big part of transportation right now. Although things are going more and more towards electric vehicles, the past century has been gas driven. So 11.9% annualized return and 3.5% dividend yield in 2019, which is pretty solid. And so Exxon, another one, of course, just for energy. You can see right now, stock price isn't too crazy, $60.39. Has definitely risen steadily up until around 2014 or so. It's kind of declining a little bit now. It just remains to be seen how much they get into, you know, clean energy, which is kind of the way the whole world is trying to go to combat things like climate change and stuff like that. So we'll see how Exxon does in the future, but right now they may not be the best one to invest in if you're just getting started. By the way, just a quick disclaimer, I am not a investment advisor. I am not certified to give you investment advice. These are just ideas for entertainment purposes, and you need to consult someone who is actually qualified to talk to you about your investment ideas. And again, I am not certified to do so. So number 10, you have General Electric, otherwise known as GE, 10.7% annualized returns from June 1997 to December 2016, 2.5% dividends yield in 2019. And of course, they are a American multinational conglomerate. They deal with aviation, healthcare, power, renewable energy, digital industry, additive manufacturing, and venture capital and finance. They have their hands in a lot of different areas. You probably even had GE built appliances in your house. So, I mean, they've done so many different things. They're not one of those like millennial stocks that you would probably think of right off the top of your head, but just been a solid one for decades. So you can see right now they kind of peaked right around the early 2000s, right around the end of the year 2000, and then they kind of started going down after that. So doesn't look like a great stock to invest in right now, but man, they had a really good run for years and years, for decades and decades throughout the 1900s. And just one to keep in mind if you're studying the history of different stocks. So then you have IBM, another one kind of like GE that's just been around forever, and they're a American multinational technology and consulting company. They deal with a lot of computer hardware and software, mostly for businesses. Another one that's not necessarily when you think about right off the top of your head when you're thinking of like tech stocks and stuff like that, but been around just for years and years, and they've had a 13.8% annualized return since June 1997 to December 2016, with a 3.7% dividend yield in 2019. So if you look at IBM, they're still doing fairly well. Their stock is at $128 or so, and they've been steadily rising. They've had a few jumps here and there through the last 20 years. Right now, not doing so great, but still has some potential. Definitely one of those that's kind of more one to study the history of. Then you have Johnson & Johnson, another one that's just well established, been around for probably over a century. American multinational corporation. They deal with medical devices, pharmaceuticals, and consumer packaged goods. You'll see all sorts of like Johnson & Johnson products like at the local CVS or Walgreens and things like that. They're even dealing with one of the COVID vaccines right now, which is kind of crazy, but 15.5% annualized return from June 1997 to December 2016, 2.3% dividend yield in 2019. So solid. If you invested in them early, obviously you would have had to be very old, but they would have done really well for you. So they've just been steadily climbing. $160.42 stock price right now here in March 2021, but they seem to not be showing any signs of decline just yet. Next you have Netflix, of course, which is going to be one of the cooler stocks to invest in, but started at $7 in 2010 during IPO, now at $516 or so in 2020, 2021, 7,371% increase. So obviously if you invested in Netflix in 2010, you're doing very well right now. American content platform, obviously known for streaming movies and TV shows online. So you can see right now here in March 2021, $520.25 stock price, doing very well. No signs of real decline yet. And you know, streaming is still like the thing right now. Everyone's trying to get their own streaming service, so they're going to have more and more competition, but they're still kind of the original to really get this started. So definitely seems like a great one to still consider. Then you have Chevron. So Chevron, of course, is big into energy, oil, natural gas, etc. 11% annualized returns from June 1997 to December 2016. 3.2% dividend yield in 2019. So solid dividends. I mean, great returns if you invested in them early. But this is another one that might make people nervous because of the major countries trying to go more away from fossil fuels. So it'll be interesting to see how Chevron does. A lot of these companies call themselves energy companies, not just like oil and gas. So we'll see if they invest more into clean energy, and that'll probably have a lot to do with whether or not their stock tanks in the future. So still doing fairly well, but seeing a little bit of decline here in the last couple of years. So then of course you have Walmart, which everybody knows about. They're worldwide. They are the one-stop shop to go to for groceries, for clothes, for anything you need around the house, etc., electronics, whatever you need. And they have an 18.4% annualized return from June 1997 to December 2016, 2% dividend yield in 2019. So their stock is at $133.43 right now. Still been steadily increasing over time. They are trying to compete more with Amazon, which is, you know, a good thing to do. Obviously, if they want to stay afloat and still be one of the top retailers. And so we'll see how they do in the future as far as their competition with being more convenience based, like Amazon delivering, you know, same day shipping and all of that. So this brings me to a few things that I noticed when looking at these different companies that are known as some of the best investments of all time in terms of stock, especially in the US. So a lot of these are actually very highly rated places to work. So one thing I'm going to show you here is kind of what it looks like when you look at employee reviews for some of the top stocks of all time. They're usually around 4 stars. So you look at like Berkshire Hathaway, 4.1 out of 5 stars from employees. You look at like Altria, 3.8 out of 5 stars. Now there are a few here and there that have maybe like low 3s. Like Apple is still really high though, 4.3 out of 5 stars. But a lot of the companies, I'd say probably 80 to 90% on this list, you see Microsoft at 4.4, have very high employee ratings for what it's like to work there. And if you study Warren Buffett, that's one thing he kind of looks for, is how well run this, a company might be. 4.5 out of 5 stars for Google. So that's one thing you might look into. I'm not saying, again, I'm not an investment advisor that's certified. So what you can do is just think about some of these things, maybe go to one that's certified to talk about this kind of stuff, and maybe make some decisions from there. But this is just some ideas for you to maybe consider. 3.8 out of 5 stars for Amazon. So I could go down this list all the way. I'll have links to the Glassdoor pages for each one of these companies in the show notes. But as you can see, they're typically very well thought of from their employees. So it seems like a great place to work. They're innovative. Obviously, a lot of the products can be used by billions of people. So if you're like, you've heard people like Pierre Diamandis and some of these people who have dealt with a lot of entrepreneurs, one of the things you might hear from them, a quote that I've heard a few times, is if you want to make $1 billion, build something that makes 1 billion lives better. So you look at some of these companies, other than say like Apple and maybe a couple others, maybe Tesla on this list, who are more like higher end price points for a lot of their products. A lot of these are geared more for the general public. So another thing to look at is, how many people could really benefit from these types of products, and how much would they use them? Would they use them on a daily basis? You look at like Johnson & Johnson, you look at Chevron, you look at Exxon, you look at some of these companies where a lot of people are commuting every day. They need gas. They have to fill up with gas every week. You have Johnson & Johnson products like your moisturizer, your lotion, whatever. You're using them on a daily basis. You look at CocaCola. A lot of people drink multiple sodas a day, water bottles, juice, whatever. You look at all these different companies. You have consumer electronics. You're probably using them on a daily basis. I use mine on a daily basis. So a few things to consider when you look at the top stocks of all time, and also a few questions maybe to ask yourself, is when you're looking at a particular stock, after kind of studying the history from a video like this, is it the future, is it the present, or the past? Have you seen the next best thing that's going to replace what you're doing? So for instance, back in the day when you start hearing about Netflix going towards like streaming and being able to watch something on your TV, there's some people probably back then that realized, hey, Blockbuster and some of these like video stores and stuff are probably going to go under in the future. Is it the present? Should you invest in something that is already like the mainstream thing? So like Netflix has a really high stock price. You have Amazon's got a really high stock price. They could keep growing, but their stock is so high right now. Should you invest in them? You can also go for investing in fractional shares with companies like Stash or Charles Schwab or things like that, where you can invest in a company for $1 or $5, even though their stock price might be $3,000. So that's another thing to consider. Or are they becoming the past? Are they something that may be the future and maybe you should invest early? Or are they something that might become a thing of the past soon? Also, do you agree with the future that the company might create? Like if everybody was using what this company kind of puts out there, would that make the future better or worse in your opinion? Do you and your friends and family use the products or services that they have? Another thing to consider. And are you comfortable holding these stocks for at least a decade? Another thing you'll see from Warren Buffett, who of course is pretty much the greatest investor of all time, he will hold these stocks for decades. So a few things to ask yourself. Again, some of the main things I found they have in common: very highly rated workplaces, something that can help at least 1 billion people, or at least mainstream types of products. And then you have something that's convenient. Everything's going more towards that. And then you look at like COVID. What are some things that people don't have to leave the house to use? So you look at like a cruise line that really tanked. That might not be the best thing to look at right now. You look at something like streaming, you look at something like home delivery, that kind of stuff could be, the future and is kind of trending that way. So hopefully this was helpful. Just a few things I noticed from studying some of the top stocks of all time, and I'll see you in the next video.